And what happened next with respect to any relationship with Mr. Depp?
Well, then we fell in love. We went on this press tour, and we went. It was a beautiful and strange time. You know, we were flying from one, not together, but going from one city to the next, Europe, New York, Los Angeles, as I said, and we're just traveling around talking about this movie that we did together, that we participated in together. We were falling in love. I mean, it was just, at the first dinner in London, he sat me next to me. He produced the film and was a part of controlling the film and was responsible for different things than I was as an actor having a small part in it. And we went on this press tour, and I think in London he had me sat next to him at a dinner, and then we ended up spending the night together in my hotel room. And for the rest of the press tour, it was on. I'll put it that way.
All right. And how long approximately did the press tour go?
I don't know exactly how long it lasted. I think, there were press engagements in this city for a few days, and then another city for a few days, and then there was a break, and then there was another press opportunity, I believe. So it was kind of spread out over maybe a month, if I'm guessing.
So when you returned to Los Angeles, what, if anything, took place with any relationship with Mr. Depp?
Well, once we were back from the press tour, we had this, whirlwind romance kind of just in these beautiful places all over, and we're falling in love and not able to really show it because the world didn't know about the split between he and his former partner. And of course, as a woman, I was like, is that troubling? And I'd ask him, no, he swore to me that they hadn't even shared a bed for a year, and that they were protecting the kids and not publicizing it. Or not making it known to the press. And so we kind of had to be a little bit under the radar. Not a little bit, we had to be really under the radar, because as Johnny pointed out, that the world would blame me and call me a homewrecker, even though I had nothing to do with it. So we were secretly dating, and then, it was beautiful. It was, I felt like this man knew me and saw me in a way that no one else had. I felt he understood me. I felt he understood where I came from. I felt that when I was around Johnny, I felt like the most beautiful person in the whole world. It made me feel seen, made me feel like $1 million. And that kind of feeling where, he's just lavish gifts and lavish expressions of love, and how he had never met a woman like me. I mean, I remember he took the foil off of this bottle and put it on my ring finger, and I had only been with him days, or maybe it was weeks at the time. Yeah, it was probably about a few weeks, but it just felt very intense. But we weren't doing normal life stuff. We weren't stuck in traffic with each other. We weren't going to the grocery store and doing life. We were hiding in these places around the world. He has so many homes. And so we'd be in one of those homes, or my home at the time, and it would be like a bubble, we were in this little bubble of secrecy, and it felt like a warm glow, as we would say. Just music and the kind of books that we both loved, and poetry that we both knew by heart, and it felt like a dream. It felt like absolute magic.
So while you're dating, I take it you're dating at this point, right?
Yeah, sorry,
while you're falling in love, you're also dating, right? Okay.
Yes.
Did there come a time early on that you ended up going to his Bahamas Island?
Yes. So shortly after, we, I think, started dating October of 2011. And, as I mentioned, this bubble, where he'd come over to my house and not leave for like 3 or 4 days, just smoking cigarettes and playing music and reading poetry to me or painting me or, just talking. And then he would disappear. And there'd be just no way to get a hold of him, no way to contact him. At first, I didn't really think anything about it, but he disappeared at one point, and then came back and said he was dealing with some health issue, and would I join him in the Bahamas? And I think that's when I learned he had an island, and I was on a trip with a friend of mine in Spain, and it was for the holidays, and I kind of rerouted my trip so I could come and land in LA landing in Miami instead of LA, so I could go and meet him on the island. And he had Keenan come and meet me on that trip, like in Miami. I get off one plane, get onto another, and go and join him on his private island. And I noticed he was drinking Beck's and tea, but like lots of tea. And I didn't foolishly think anything of it. I just, thought the man really seriously, I missed it before, but really, really loves tea. And we had this beautiful, less than a week probably, trip in the Bahamas, a private island, beautiful sandy beaches. It's a scene that you just don't, I had never experienced anything like that. It was a beautiful place, a beautiful time, and I fell head over heels in love with this man.
So after the Bahamas, I assume you came back, and are we talking now early 2012?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what were you doing work-wise while you were dating him in this early stage?
What I always do, I would be taking job to job to job, going from one movie to the next, mostly not filming in LA. So weirdly, you live in LA to go shoot on location in other places. So when I was in town, we would go back to this bubble, like insular bubble with beautiful, blaringly loud music and no one else and nothing else. And then, I'd go off to work. And so would he. Eventually, yeah, he left to shoot Lone Ranger, I believe.
Okay. Now, we've heard a little bit about Lone Ranger, and that's about mid-2012, is that right, when he was shooting that?
That sounds right, mid-2012, yeah.
And were you shooting anything at that time?
I was shooting...
Machete Kills?
I believe I was shooting Machete Kills in Austin. I had a small part in a Robert Rodriguez film that shot in Austin. Okay. But I think Johnny was shooting and then having some time off, and there was just a lot of travel, a lot of movement. So.
Okay. And so what, if any, visiting did you do with Johnny while he was on his set for Lone Ranger, and where was he?
Well, he was filming all over the Southwest, and at some point I came to visit him and on one of his locations, and I would stay in the house because I couldn't really, occasionally I would leave with his security guards, but I didn't really have anything to do but visit him for a few days. So I'd cook and kind of stay at home and paint or whatever and wait for him to come home and have dinner ready. And we would have these little bubbles, but kind of scattered throughout the Southwest as he was filming. And at the time, Johnny had, when I first arrived at one of these locations, it was the first time that Johnny told me that he had had a health issue, something with his liver, and that he wasn't, that's why he was not drinking. He was drinking a lot of tea, like a lot of tea.
And so we've heard a little testimony about boots. What, if anything, did you do to help Johnny with his boots?
Well, I mean, I I suppose that I took off his boots, and it made an impression on him, and I was happy to, anything I can do to show love. Certainly how I felt about him. But if he wanted to take off his own boots, he certainly could.
Did you buy Mr. Depp any knives during that time period?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
What if anything did you do with respect to knives during the time period you were with him in the Lone Ranger?
Objection leading.
What if anything?
Overruled.
Johnny had a thing for turquoise, and that eventually, being in the Southwest, it can happen really quickly. I also too really love turquoise, and he has he loved knives. He loves a lot of things. When Johnny loves things, he does it a lot, lots of it. So he had these daggers that he had given me that they were beautiful in design. And they're, long, curved daggers. And he just talked a lot about knives, had a knife and gun collection, and was quite proud of it. And at some point, I don't really remember exactly when it was, but at some point I picked up what I thought was a really beautiful turquoise-handled knife. And I had it engraved with a saying that Johnny would say to me all the time, which I thought was romantic, as funny as that is to say now.
And what was the expression, the saying?
Until death, hasta la muerte in Spanish.
Now, by the time that you're visiting Mr. Depp during his shooting of Lone Ranger in the June through August 2012 timeframe, what, if any, relationship has he developed with your family?
Oh, well, starting really early on, Johnny was so kind, so generous to my family, but especially my mom and dad. He met my dad, and my dad's a big personality. He's a rowdy guy, and Johnny just all of a sudden, I had never noticed, Johnny have a southern, all of a sudden Johnny had this southern accent and was really like buddies with him, and they really seemed to get along very well. They're, just like instantly he was giving my dad gifts, he gave him guns, he gave him knives. They had this, Johnny just really just showered my dad, and my dad's a working man, salt of the earth guy, and he was just like, floored. He's getting all these amazing gifts and being invited to come on to these locations, and Johnny's this big movie star, and my dad was just like, I think my dad would have married him himself, not if I hadn't. And he just instantly, he gave my mom jewelry, brought her out to come and see me while I was visiting Johnny on Lone Ranger in some part of the Southwest. I think it was Colorado. He gave her this beautiful turquoise necklace, and they were definitely taken by him.
And what, if any, relationship had Mr. Depp forged with Whitney by this time, your sister?
I believe the relationship came a little bit later as they got to know each other, but he did the same thing with my sister and just really found a bond with them that it was, he tried to do anything and everything he could to make them feel like special, and they did. My mom, my dad, and my sister.
And what, if any, relationships did Mr. Depp form with your friends?
Well, Johnny's so generous and can be this really, like, overly generous almost, like showering you with gifts and compliments and just, and he has access and means to really, we're not talking about giving you a card. We're like talking about just these like extravagant trips or these extravagant gestures, and it's a lot. And he did that with my close friends. I relied heavily on my friends, and had a pretty strong support network with them. And he really just showered them with generosity and love and light, and invited them to come to these exotic places and flew people here and there. I mean, it's incredibly generous.
So going back to the filming of The Lone Ranger, what, if anything, did Mr. Depp do with respect to a horse?
Objection leading.
What, if anything?
Overruled. Johnny at one point insisted on buying me a horse, and I, of course, said that's extravagant. There's no way I could accept that. That's also, how will I take care of that horse? You know, it's so extravagant. So I said no, of course. Eventually, he got a hold of my dad and worked it out with my dad, like what kind of horse to buy, and then showed me a picture of this horse and said, "It's yours. It's coming here." I think it was being transported, and he said, you know, that he had my dad's help on it, picking out. And you know, I grew up on my dad's horses. You know, I grew up riding with my dad, so you know, I had resisted for I think about like a month and a half or something of him kind of bringing up the idea and me saying, "That's a crazy gift. No, thank you. No, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't accept." To all of a sudden I had a colt.
So let's take you through 2012 and your relationship. Could you just describe for the jury a little bit about how that relationship evolved through 2012?
It was always intense. It didn't become intense. It almost started that way. When I was with him, you know, I felt that electricity in my body. I felt like butterflies. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't see straight practically. It was just, you know, I was head over heels in love. And he felt like that to me. He felt like he was also in love. I didn't feel like he was faking it. I felt like what we had, it felt like to me at the time there wasn't any love like that, you know? I mean, and then he started to kind of do this thing again where he'd disappear and he'd come back. And I remember at first when he first started drinking, I didn't really think much of it, but all of a sudden the behavior kind of started to go in line with the disappearing, and he'd come back and he'd just be different. And I'd say something and he'd accuse me of saying something else or saying it in a different way, or he would, it was mostly my clothing at the time and me working. That was the main thing. Like, I found myself trying to not talk about auditions because it would change the mood so dramatically. I tried to, you know, he would make these comments about, you know, whoring myself out, but do so in the context of me acting, you know, and he would talk about other actresses who do my role in this way where they were worthless whores, that they were, you know, fame hungry, you know, expletive, you know, just this. The point is, it felt really dirty to be an actor. Never mind that he was one. It was dirty that I wanted to do this job that I wanted to do, and I was doing the job of an actress. It was everything every time I was walking out of the house, he would ask me, "That's really what you're wearing, kid? Oh, I see." You know, I wore a dress to an event once, and I felt beautiful in it. Like, stupid as that sounds, I felt pretty in this dress I picked out, and I showed it him because you know, it's a carpet, it's red carpet, so it's like, you know, publicized, and I kind of thought it was weird he wasn't saying anything about it. You know, I left him to go do this red carpet, and I was like, "Did you see the you know, the event I went to?" You know, basically, I felt pretty, and I thought, like, "Did you see that?" You know, I wanted him to say something about that, I guess. And he said, Well, this is after he stopped talking to me for some time, didn't tell me why. When he came back in my life, he wouldn't explain why he was acting different. He just kind of acted mad at me, didn't know what I had done wrong. And when I brought up the dress and the event, because it was an event to support a charity I was really involved with at the time, and I said, you know, did you see that thing? And he said, yeah, I think the whole world saw that kid. That's how they'll remember you. That's how the world will remember you. And I was like, oh, come on. I mean, it's like, but it, you know, I felt good in it. I felt good. And he said, yeah, kid, that's what you're putting out there in the world. No one will ever forget that. And that's all they'll see you as. That's what you wanted. That's what you were going for. You know, my dress was low cut. I get it. It's low cut. But I felt, you know, I felt really embarrassed and horrible that I wore that. I felt like, how could I have made that choice? Of course, you know, he's right. You know, you start to believe it. I started to believe that made a lot of sense, of course. But it didn't stop with that. It was just, it was clothing in general. And when I walked out of the house, it wasn't just like, hey, you're not allowed to wear that. It was like, oh, really? That's what you're wearing. No wonder you get cast in those roles. No wonder you that's what you are. That's what you're making it. And it continued. And then there would be a blow up. And at first it was just to throw something, smash some things. It loves to smash up a place, an apartment, furniture is what it started with. Glass, threw glass at me, and I remember it was summer. And he just threw this glass across the kitchen, and it didn't hit me, but it shattered behind me, and I remember thinking that it like very easily could have hit me. And that, calling me a whore, it didn't start with using the whore word, it was just comments until it would escalate. And then I started to notice the pattern of escalation where he'd throw glass or turn over a table. Then he would hit the wall, and then he'd hit the wall really close to my head. You know, like when I'm standing there, you know, just hit the wall, screaming at me. But then he would disappear and get clean and sober, and he'd come back and tell me that he was done drinking, he was over it, he was done, cleaned himself up, he had done it before, and he'd do it again. And then he would go back to this, like, wonderful, like, almost like just unreal, like, but real, you know, but unbelievably nice, sensitive, kind, warm, generous, interesting, funny man that I loved. And he would make me feel so loved, like I would feel so distant from that thing that was so scary that I would not even recognize it too. And that was how, you know, our relationship kind of started to develop in that first year.
Do you remember the first time that he physically hit you?
Yes.
Please tell the jury about it.
It's seemingly so stupid, so insignificant. I will never forget it. It changed my life. I was sitting on the couch, and we were talking. We were having a normal conversation, you know, just, there was no fighting, no argument, nothing. And he was drinking, and I didn't realize at the time, but I think he was using cocaine because it was like there was a jar of cocaine out on the table. I realize that sounds weird, but it was like an actual vintage jar of it. But I didn't see him use it at the time, so I didn't really factor that in. I just, you know, he's drinking and we're talking, and there's music playing, and he's smoking cigarettes, and we're sitting next to each other on the couch. And I asked him about the tattoo he has on his arm. And to me, it just looked like black marks. I didn't know what it said. It just looked like muddled, faded tattoo that was hard to read. And I said, what does it say? And he said it says wino. It says wino. And I didn't see that. I thought he was joking. because it didn't look like it said that at all, and I laughed. It was that simple. I just laughed because I thought he was joking, and slapped me across the face. And I laughed. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. I thought, this must be a joke. This must be a joke. Because I didn't know what was going on. I just stared at him, kind of laughing still, thinking that he was going to start laughing too to tell me it was a joke. But he didn't. He said, "You think it's so funny? You think it's funny, bitch? You think you're a funny bitch?" And he slapped me again. Like, it was clear it wasn't a joke anymore. And I stopped laughing, but I didn't know what else to do. You know, I didn't know what to do. You would think you would have a response, but I, as a woman, had never been hit like that. I'm an adult, and I'm sitting next to the man I love, and he slapped me for no reason, it seemed like, and I missed the point. It was that stupid. Second slap, I know he's not kidding, but I don't know what else to say or do, so I just stared at him. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I didn't move or freak out or defend myself or say, "What are you doing? You're crazy." I just stared at him because I didn't know what else to do. And he slaps me one more time. Hard. I lose my balance. At this point, we're sitting next to each other on the edge of the couch, or I was on the edge of the couch. And I'm all of a sudden realizing that the worst thing has just happened to me that could possibly happen to you. I realized that I wish so much he had said he was joking, because it didn't hurt. It didn't physically hurt me. I was just sitting there on this carpet, looking at the dirty carpet, wondering how I wound up on this carpet and why I never noticed that the carpet was so filthy before, and I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. I just sat there thinking, how much time do I have till I figure out what I need to do? Because, God, did he just hit me? No, I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want this to be the reality. I didn't want to have the man I was in love with. I know you don't come back from that. You know, I'm not dumb. I know you can't hit a woman. You can't hit a man. You can't hit anyone. You can't just hit somebody because I knew it was wrong, and I knew that I had to leave him. And that's what broke my heart, because I didn't want to leave him. I thought if I got up out of that room, I'd leave the best thing that ever happened to me. And I wish I could sit here and say I stood up and I walked out of that house and I drew a line and I stood up for myself. But I was just looking at the dirty carpet, trying to will myself to get up, to walk out of the door, because I knew I needed to. And I really slowly, I stood up, and I remember looking at him in the eye and just looking at him, frankly, because I didn't know what else to do. And before I know it, he starts crying. And, you know, like, I had never seen an adult man cry. I didn't even really see my dad cry at my grandma's funeral. You know, it's weird. And he's crying. Tears, just falling out of his eyes. He gets down on his knees and he grabs my hands and he's touching my hands and he's saying to me, "I will never do that again. I'm so sorry, baby. I put the fucker away. I thought I killed it and it's done. I thought I put the monster away and I've done it before. It's done." But on his knees. And I didn't have words. I didn't know what to say. I just remember thinking that it was just, he was crying. He seemed so sorry, but I knew I couldn't just forgive him because that means it will happen again, no? you know, like I've seen the health class videos, like everyone else. And I got up in my car, I walked to the car, I didn't say anything. I made a point to not say, oh, it's okay, or anything like that. I just didn't say anything. I got up, I went to the car, I sat in my car, and I felt like I sat there forever. I didn't want to turn the key. I just leaned my head up against the window, and I remember just seeing my breath on the windshield, you know, on the glass of the window of the door, just seeing my breath and trying to will myself to have the strength to know what I should do in this moment, because I was heartbroken. And I sat there for a long time, and I eventually turned the key and drove home.